Bahamut Phase 3 Ascension means a lot to me. I think the term that I've used in the past is that a lot of video game music is the evolution of classical music. It's what I base the foundation of this channel on. There's so much to talk about within this piece. Here is Bahamut Phase 3 Ascension. So I think it's really important for us to talk about what's occurring and what has occurred. You know, Dion was on our side. Dion is helping Joshua. Dion was part of the plan that was in place to get us to get into the crystal. It's been a couple weeks since I played, so some of this stuff is a little bit murky. But I think one of the things that we hear when we listen to this track right off the bat is actually the sadness. Now, obviously, Bahamut is one of the strongest icons. Now, of course, you could argue that Odin or Titan are stronger, but Bahamut, to me, represents the strongest and most regal, which makes sense given Dion's lineage and Dion's history, and also the betrayal and true feeling of remorse and sadness when we think about what has occurred to Dion's family and his relationship with his father. And it's a very complex, painful experience. And we also find out what has occurred and how Dion has murdered his father on accident while trying to protect him from Ultima and so on and so forth. So in the strings, not only are we getting the sense of Ifrit and Phoenix's battle against Bahamut, but we're also getting the agony that is in Dion. Even though Dion in this moment may not have any understanding of what's occurring due to the aether flow and due to all this other stuff, the toxicity and things, he's become sort of possessed by the ether. There is an inherent sadness to this. And I think that what makes this theme so incredible is that we still are trying to uphold that sense of classical regality, which is why this track sounds so incredibly Baroque and classical in its very nature. Now, there is a lot of intensity here. It's got a lot of Carmina Burana by Carl Orff in it. It also has Vivaldi and Winter in there, Vivaldi's Winter, and there's also some Bach, and there's also some Beethoven in the soundscape. And it's really interesting because it takes all of these elements and homogenizes them into one cohesive soundscape. So I think that it's a really awesome thing because people have been going absolutely nuts about this theme. And it shows to me that people, yes, they may have had the interactive experience of fighting Bahamut while listening to this incredible Vivaldi string ensemble. And yet there is still the hope in my spirit that people may actually end up loving classical music because they love something like this. And it's totally valid. And it's amazing. Let's keep going and I'll break down some stuff as we go. And even here, I mean, if we look at, don't you hear the inherent sadness in the strings, but also in the choral writing? Now let's rewind just a second and listen to that horn, okay? The counter melody with the sopranos, and then you have the men going whatever the words are, dun dun dun. That's a sharp rhythm in counterpoint with the incredibly legato, and that's something that we hear in opera. Actually, if you think of Act 3 of La Traviata, Violetta sings Alfredo, Alfredo, tu non dovresti provar non so, and then the entire rest of the ensemble sings da 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 da. So this is a thing, this sort of dual melodies, or a melody line that then is emphasized by shorter notes. That is something that occurs in music all the time, certainly in classical music, which this is based off of. And so I it's such a little thing, and it's 30 seconds in, but it's really fun to hear these little musical gestures that have been around for hundreds of years. But so this is like the classic reason why video games, I think, are the continuation of Richard Wagner's idea of Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work, right? Because video games are doing this thing that we don't get to do anywhere else. There's interactivity, there's audio-visual, there's characterization, there's story, there's drama, there's tension. So all these things are a total package. The reason why I bring that up is because once Ifrit and Phoenix combine into whatever I forget the name of the icon, special Ifrit, let's say, we hear them, and it resolves. It surges in climax, it surges in power, it makes us feel empowered because for the very first moment, these two brothers that have been seeking each other out for one reason or another finally are coming together, and finally the two icons of fire become one. And finally, we get this surge of adrenaline as we unite, finally, after what feels like 20 hours, Well, it probably was 20 hours, actually. So that is one of those things that only video games can do, and do exceptionally well, more so than movies and more so than stage, theater, or symphonic work, is it really makes you feel in the driver's seat. In a moment like this, which I think hits musically, really hits when you see the visuals. Now notice the build up here too. A very simple thing to do. All we're doing is pushing pause as we transition beyond the heavens and move into Ascension proper. And if you think about the title, Ascension makes complete sense because now Ifrit takes the sky with Phoenix, and this is of course a fantastic musical moment here. I mean, hello, that is classical music. That is literally, not even the umbrella term classical music. That is classical music. That is literally Bach, and that's literally Vivaldi. I've been studying this track for a little bit here, and this sounds nearly identical-ish to Vivaldi's Four Seasons Winter. It has this really intense, almost angry sounding and motivated quality in the strings. It feels very broody. It certainly is very heavy in a classical way. And the reason why I say in a classical way is because we have to understand that classical music is very structured. There's no overindulgence of emotion. No. Classical music is very, 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 very precise. It's very accurate. It's very in the box. There's no deviating from that. There's no overt displays of emotion. There's no excessive use of lyrical singing that wasn't part of the instrumentation. So singers, when they're singing in the Baroque and classical time period, are part of the ensemble. They are not the soloists per se. Now, granted, in that time period, there were castrati and there were other people that were stars by all means. However, the vocalism was all part of the ensemble. You were presenting. And also you have to remember that in Bach's time, even though that music was based around, it's called simple music, which is different than programmatic music, which all video game music is. It's aiding us in telling a story. It's why I believe that video games are modern operas. Simple music was written for the act of listening to it. And often it was, written for the church, or it was written as salon music where you would be eating your dinner and there possibly be music or a string ensemble or something. Like, its purpose was to be heard. It was not to be felt or experienced. Simple music. Now, that being said, you could argue that Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, the point of that is like one of the first programmatic works because it was trying to recount what the seasons sound like. And that's certainly a thing that is also prevalent. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but what I want to say is that, like, what I love about this is that even though we now have this incredible superpower with Ifrit and Phoenix fighting against Bahamut, the music is classically based, which is very, 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 very interesting. And I think it does ultimately continue to highlight Dion and the struggle that he is going through, having lost control of Bahamut and himself, the loss of his father, Ultima overtaking them, him trying to do what's right, It's really interesting stuff. This, to me, sounds so much like Beethoven. I mean, it's just crazy. So what I love about this, if we just go back a little bit, listen to the counter melody in the horn. Ba, 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 da, da, ba, da. Ba, 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 da, da, ba, da. And then in the choral section you have that is again causing the rhythm is the battle, and that horn is the feeling of power, embodying, you know, this new form. And then we have got doubling, so then we add emphasis to that melody with the sopranos and the horn. Aren't those musical gestures so interesting? That sounds like the Megaflare. That sounds like launching an attack. That sounds like preparing to launch an attack. It's this very like swirling like hit of a blade. It's very ferocious. And see, this here now, this to me is a quality of courageous pursuit. Da, 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 da. This is the same rhythm as before, but now the pitches are different. So even though it's like a counter melody, it's like an inverse, a mirror image of the beginning of this section. And the way that these strings are written here really does give a sense of desperation. It gives a sense of like, oh my God, we're really up against the wall. We have no choice. We have to defend, we have to defeat, we have to defend, and we have to defeat. We have to defeat Bahamut. We have to defend ourselves. And there's a bit of worry there because we had to combine. If Ifrit and Phoenix were not capable of taking out Bahamut on their own, and so they had to rely on each other, brotherly love, to come together to fight this. And so now there's like, okay, we can't let this defeat us. It's just crazy because this actually also reminds me of like the Bach Magnificat in D. It's so crazy. I mean, like, and I don't really understand the choice of using men here, and I don't necessarily understand why we're in this exclusively classical bass. It's so wonderfully perplexing to me and satisfying, but like, I just want to re-listen. Like that is like it's so funny because that to me is actually positive, resounding, focused, but also like it's so classical that it leaves me literally speechless. Like I have nothing to say. Like that's classical music. That's literally music. You go listen to any like St. Matthew Passion, the Bach, St. John's Passion. That's the kind of music you might hear. That's like Handel. I think about like Judas Maccabeus or even the Messiah. These pieces have qualities of them that are literally sound like that, and that's in my Final Fantasy. And I mean, obviously, yes, the classical output, like I mentioned before, is all related to and connected to Dion, Bahamut, but I'm just so like giddy that I literally, when I was playing this, I was just like, there's nothing else to say. I mean, like it's classical music in a very, very, very 21st century style that it is. I just can't wait to hear this in a symphony hall. I've literally heard this gesture in classical music, and you still get the incredible swell, grow. And now we get to the absolute best part. This is when the strings go absolutely bananas. This sounds exactly like a Winter from Vivaldi. And I just can't get over, like, if you go to any church service in like a... it just sounds so much. Everything we just listened to, I literally have sung some variation of. Here we go, baby. Like, that's absolutely insanely sick, right? I mean, listen to it again. I mean, so what's crazy to me about that is that you have this incredibly fast-moving string section. Again, measured, controlled, focused, right in line. We're not deviating anything. It's not about expressing emotion. But then you have these incredible brass and percussion parts that are sharp rhythmically and complement this incredibly melodic violin. I mean, that is absolutely nutty. So again, we have the same thing. We have it repeated, but now the difference is, listen to the way the ensemble is going. That is so incredibly effective. That just makes you feel like you're running it just makes you feel like you're running a marathon. I mean, that's volatile. It's violent, but it's also like a bit of laughter, but also like just the way that it like makes the body pulsate. A singer to have to sing that, that's not easy, and it really makes you feel like you're up against a god, you know? Key change. And this is like Don Giovanni right here. Oh, dun, dun. It sounds like Faust. And then you get this gong underneath. And then we go back into the tragedy. listen to the way the strings complement that tragedy. And then listen to the strings. Yada, yada, da. This is Shakespearean. This is Macbeth. This is Othello. This is a loss and a suffering in Dion that is beyond comprehension and measure. This is the loss of everything. The stakes are so incredibly high. There's nowhere to go but down, to fall from grace. It's so incredibly powerful. And you hear that, those lower men. They're powerful. They're anguished. And I'll never get over those horns. Ba da da, ba da da, ba da da, ba da 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 da. You hear the anguish in that. You hear the I mean, look at all the different ways that we take little instruments here and there, and all of a sudden you sprinkle them in and you layer them in the track, and you get this like different versions of agony from different instruments, and each instrument has a different quality for the emotions that we feel. So a trumpet might sound one way when we feel agony, the voices in the choir may have another sound when we have agony, the drums may include a different soundscape. You combine all that together and you just get this incredibly heavy feeling of depression and loss. It's amazing. And then there's a begging quality to it too that I'm listening to this. It's like, oh, Dan, come on. This wasn't part of the plan. You're supposed to be with us. You're supposed to help us. Come on, man. Snap out of it. Ba, 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 ba. Anyway, I mean, I could talk about that all night. I mean, that is such an incredible piece. It really does feel like I feel so validated by the team at Square Enix, by Masayoshi Soken, by Maestro Soken, for creating something that really does feel like, if you were to take, because, you know, there's a whole area of classical music, neoclassical already exists. Igor Stravinsky coined the term. You know, we've been talking about classical music 80 years or however long, whenever Igor was around, where, you know, he, in the Rake's Progress, it sounds like modern Mozart, modern for the time, And it has like literally neoclassical approaches to the way it sounds, even though Igor Stravinsky was writing stuff much later after Mozart was dead. And so then now in 2023, Soken and team show up, and they're like, oh, well, here you go. Do you understand? Like, that's why my brain melts when I hear this, because this is literally just the continuation of a tradition. Just now the medium is in video games, but the tradition is the same. This is neoclassical, but the 2023 version of it. And so as a classical person who studied music and was an opera singer, you know, for a decade, am an opera singer because you never stop being an opera singer. Like, I mean, I'm left stuttering here because it's just incredible. And this was obviously my favorite track of the game. So there's more Final Fantasy on the channel. There's more Final Fantasy 16 to come on the channel. As always, feel free to like, subscribe. Thanks a ton for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And as always, I'll see you later. Bye.